So today I wanted to talk about how what happens when you read the Bible as a story without chapters or verses. Okay, and what you begin to see, and when you see that, then you can understand how to look at every part of the Bible. Okay, you're not just like looking, okay, what does this mean? But you kind of go in there with the understanding that this is what it's about, and so it's kind of you look at that section with a broader understanding. Okay, so I've read the Bible many times, like many times, and if you could look on my shelves, I got so many Bibles. I've spent, I think, maybe around $1,000, maybe a little more, for Bibles, right? And I wouldn't buy like cheap Bibles. I would buy like $100, $200 Bibles, because I like nice quality Bibles, right? It's a vice, but my wife has asked me to calm down with it. So, but after the Reader's Bible, I stopped. There was no need for me to buy new Bibles. So one day I came across the Reader's Bible, and I saw it at McKay's. There's a used bookstore down the road. I saw it, and I looked at it, and I was like, "Oh, this is cool." I took it home, and I tried reading it, but it was no different. Like, there's no difference, because the letters were tiny, like the one you have. Right? It's like thick, letters tiny, and it's just really hard to. It's no different than the regular Bibles, you know. And so I returned it, and then I was like, "Hey, Reader's Bible." I wondered if there's anything better. So I looked online. I found this ESV Reader's Bible. There's 6 volumes, right? And it's she has one. I'm sure some of you guys have seen it at least. It's divided in sections where it's like Torah is one book about this thick, about that size, and then the historical books about that size. And it just kind of builds and is about this big. Got it, and I started reading it, and I absolutely fell in love. I was just lost in it. But it felt weird at times, because I felt like I'm supposed to stop somewhere and ask questions. But the story doesn't allow me to do that, because I feel like if I don't get this, I should read the next part to understand this part. I should just keep going, right? And so that's what I did. I went over and over again. And one day I was reading where I knew was Genesis 9, right? I just knew that because I read it so many times. This is right after the flood. New beginning is about to happen. And I stopped and wait. Everything from Genesis 1 through 9 was one story. Because in the past, I always thought it as the creation story, the fall, the first murder, right? And genealogy and wondering why it's there. And you get stuck, and then you come to Noah's story. So I saw it as all separate stories. And I thought that was the way it's supposed to be. But when I just kind of flowed through the whole section without chapters or verses, I was like, wait, this whole thing is just one story. And then I stopped, and I looked at the blank wall in front of me, and I saw the whole thing play out. It's like a graph that I'm going to show you right now. Everything I had read before just kind of came together. And what I tell people about Jeology is 2 things. It's not a new Bible study method. It is a Bible reading method. Okay? And the second part is that I'm not teaching anything new. I'm just organizing what you already know. Okay? The problem, in my experience with a lot of people in their relationship with the Bible, is they're not reading it first. They're jumping into the study. They're trying to understand and analyze it without having read it first. And the next thing is that we've never really organized it the way it's supposed to be. I shared this with a professor, and he said he's never seen the Bible this way. Because he's always seen the Bible systematically, where he takes an idea, a doctrine, and he finds themes, like the Sabbath theme or the great controversy theme, right? The law theme. But he's never seen anybody explain the Bible as it's written. Just kind of show the way, this is how it's written, and this is the structure, this is the pattern, just the way in the order it's written. I'm not turning anything around. I'm just showing that this is in the order, this is what it means, okay? And so what I realized is that the Bible has a pattern. So it's a long introduction, short summary, crisis, offer of salvation results, okay? Okay? What I realized is that the Bible it starts off with a long introduction, okay? long introduction. And then after that, there's a short summary. Okay? And there's a crisis. And then there is an offer of salvation. Okay? And then based on the offer of salvation, everything is determined. Okay? So Genesis 1 through 4 covers three events in great detail. Okay? What's the first event that it explains? Genesis 1, creation. Genesis 1 and 2 is in creation. Genesis 3, what's Genesis 3 about? Adam and Eve and the fall. Okay? And then Genesis 4 is what? Cain and Abel. Right? So 4 chapters are given to 3 events in great detail. Right? It shows what God did first and what he did next. And it shows the conversation that happened between like the serpent and Eve. And then it talks about how God comes and he talks with them. And then it talks about how like the Cain and Abel, they fought and then killed. Right? Everything is given so much detail. So let's just say the events of Genesis 1 could be like just 10 days of events. Like the overall time might be longer, but the focus that it places on those 10 days is a lot, right? 7 days of creation, 1 day to fall, and 1 day to kill somebody, right? Let's just say just 10 days, right? Just roughly. That's where the focus is. But compared to that, Genesis 5 summarizes 2,000 years in 1 chapter. It's the genealogy. It goes from Adam to Noah. They begat this person and he died. They begat this person and he died. Right? It's just, compared to this, is really not fair. Short summary. And what happens in Genesis 6? What kind of crisis are we seeing?
The world is wicked.
Yes. The wicked world. Okay? As a result, what does God decide to do?
Bring a flood.
Bring a flood. So, because of the wicked world, they deserve the flood. Okay? But before the flood, what does God give as the offer of salvation? Right. The ark of salvation also makes sense. Ark. Okay? So here's the thing. Whether they die in the flood or they enter the new world, depends squarely on whether they get in the ark. Okay? They could have lived a very wicked life. If they just get in the ark, they live. Okay? But even if they lived a good life, if they didn't get in the ark, they died. Okay? So this is one story. And then I stopped. That's when I looked at the wall and I was like, wait. And the whole Bible just kind of fell into place. And I realized that this pattern of long introduction, short summary, crisis, offer of salvation, result is the pattern of the Bible. Okay? 1 Samuel 1 to 1 King 11, 4 guys are summarized. Oh, no. Explain in great detail 4 people's lives. Who are the 4 people? 1 Samuel to 1 King. Samuel, Saul, David, Solomon. Okay? These 4 guys get, I believe, 67 chapters. Okay? That's a lot of detail. And then, in 1 Kings 12 to 16, I believe 7 kings are summarized in 5 chapters. So it's really not fair in regards to screen time. They're clearly the main characters. They're just extras. Okay? And then we come to 1 Kings 16:30. Can you read that, Andrew? 1 Kings 16:30. Can you check if it's still recording? 1 Kings 16:30. What does it say about this king named Ahab? How does it compare to the rest of the kings before him?
Now Ahab, the son of Omri, did evil in the sight of the Lord, more than all who were before him.
Okay, he was the worst. Okay, so what we see happening here is that God did a good thing in setting up the monarchy. David was a good king. They built the temple. Everything was going well. But in about 5 chapters, it just goes downhill, right? And with 1 Kings 16 with Ahab, they're in the worst situation possible. Okay, and because of Ahab's sins, Assyria eventually comes and destroys Israel. But before that happens, who is introduced in chapter, I believe, 16 after the comment? Who is introduced? Elijah. Okay, Elijah. And of course, then it's like taken over by Elisha. And what's amazing is that from this point on, from the mention that he was the worst king, the rest of, so 1 Kings 16 all the way to like 2 Kings, I think, I forgot where, somewhere, it's basically all about God, what God does for Israel through Elijah and Elisha. And then once Elisha dies, there's a quick succession of events. Israel is destroyed, and the story's over. Okay? And so what we find here is the same pattern. Like, long introduction, short summary, bad situation, and offer of salvation. And those who accept Elisha and Elijah are forgiven, even Ahab. Okay? And I was like, wait, this is the history of Israel. I was like, this is the history of Judah as well, because the Torah covers 2 narratives. 2 narratives and 2 narratives alone. We have the story of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, their family story. And then the rest of the Torah is all about the Exodus journey. Right? Nothing else beyond that. That's it. And so 2 narratives are given so much detail in this book, this thick book called Torah. And then after that, there's a section called History, which covers the same amount of space in regards to content, but so many more narratives. So compared to this, the historical books are like a summary. And then we come to a crisis. We come to the wisdom books. Wisdom books are personal crisis. Like Job is going through a personal crisis. And Psalms are books that were written, letters or messages that were written by people going through personal crises. Proverbs is Solomon trying to prevent your crisis. And is Ecclesiastes, Solomon like being very extreme, hoping that you don't repeat his mistakes, right? Like he's saying, vanity is vanity, all is vanity. So wisdom books is personal crisis. And then we have the prophets. What kind of crisis is that? So if the wisdom books are personal crisis, what kind of crisis is the prophets? National. Because where are they when the prophets are speaking? Mostly. They're in Babylon. In Judah's history, they could not be lower than in Babylon. That is the worst crisis that they've ever experienced. Okay? And they still talk about it as the worst time in their history. Okay? And then it is, what book comes after this of the prophets? The Gospels. Do they deserve the Gospels? Do they deserve Jesus? No. Did they deserve the ark? No. Did they deserve Elijah? No. They didn't deserve Jesus. And so the message is consistent, but this is not the end. Because those who rejected Jesus were destroyed by Titus in 70 AD with Jerusalem. Judah is gone. But those who accepted Jesus, they built the early church. Okay? And then I realized that the final piece of this pattern is the New Testament. Matthew to Jude covers 100 years of church history. From the birth of Jesus to the exile of John in Patmos. Okay? So so much details. The entire New Testament is just that period of time. And then Revelation 1, 2, 3, you know how long of time they summarize? 2,000 years. in the 7 churches. Right? And then the same time period is repeated between 4 to 10 in all the 7 seals, 7 trumpets, 7 plagues. Right? The 7 is repeated. The same time period, 2,000 years of time, is repeated over and over again in a short amount of time. Yes, there's a lot of chapters, 10 chapters, but still, it's not talking in more detail. It's just same time period. Okay? It is talking in more detail, but it's same time period. Compared to this, it's still short, very short. Okay, very short summary. And then we come to the worst crisis in Revelation 11 through 13. Why is that the worst crisis? Who is reigning? Babylon. Dragon. This is the Antichrist. Right? The world is wandering after the beast. Okay? This is the worst crisis the world has ever seen. And if God is like me, I'd be like, I tried really hard to be nice. Now, you should have gotten your act together, but clearly you failed. So I think we're done. But instead, God sends an offer of salvation in Revelation 14. What's that? How many angels?
3 angels.
3 angels. It's a 3 angels message. Okay? And those who accept, or those who reject it, they receive the end of the world. And those who accept it, they become a part of the New Jerusalem. Okay? This is the entire Bible. Can you see it? Right? Every part of the Bible is covered in this pattern. What this means is that when you look at this pattern, when you read the Bible, you have to ask, where am I in this pattern? Okay? So if I'm in the introduction section, in these parts, I focus on the details. I don't ask questions. I don't try to figure out what it means or how it all fits. No. Just make sure you get the details straight. Because you need the details to understand the crisis and the offer. Okay? So bear with me. You need to understand the details here, and then you need to flow with the summary here. If you're reading these sections, don't get bogged down by the details. Just let it carry you, but make sure you have the details straight and see how the details are playing its part in the summaries, and then so that when you come to the crisis, you know exactly what happened. You're not confused by the situation. And if you understand and accept what's happening here as the continuation of this, you will appreciate the offer of salvation. Does that make sense? And when you appreciate the offer, you will know the significance of it, and you will see the justice of God. And so, but there's a few things I need to understand, and that is that if you look in these situations, right, there's a commonality that happens here, okay, and that is that in these situations, the biggest issue at heart is whether you agree with God's assessment of the crisis. Okay? So hear me out. I was taught, and I think we were all taught, that growing up, that the reason people didn't get in the ark was because it had never rained before. Right? And so if it's never rained before, so the flood is crazy, so nobody got on. No, it goes deeper than that. The issue is that they didn't agree with the wickedness of the world. Or well, I should say it differently. They didn't agree with God's assessment of the wickedness of the world. Okay? What I mean by that is, if they agreed with God that the world was wicked, then the flood is justified. If the flood is justified, the ark is necessary. But if they disagreed with the world, then God won't destroy the world, because we're not that bad. Then why get in the ark? Because to get in the ark means more than just believing that a rain is coming. Right? It's not just accepting a freak of nature is going to happen. Right? No, it's a deep sense of agreement. The world is wicked, deserves to be destroyed, and therefore I'm going to get in the ark. You get what I mean by that? Okay? So you have to appreciate and understand there's a situation for which the offer of salvation is necessary. Okay? So here, the problem with King Ahab, fundamentally, is that he didn't think that it was that bad that he had married Jezebel, that he had, Baal worship happening. He didn't think it was that bad. Okay? He didn't think it was that serious. So when Elijah and Elisha came and he says, no rain, this is too much. Like, you are causing trouble in Israel. That's why Ahab said, you are the troubler. Are you not the troubler of Israel? Right? He saw Elijah as the problem, not his idolatry, which means that he didn't agree with God about the assessment of the situation. And therefore, he struggled to appreciate Elijah. Okay? Here, Jesus said their problem for the Jews is that they were blind. No. They were blind, but they claimed to see, which means that they didn't appreciate Jesus' assessment of the situation. Therefore, they didn't understand the value of his offer. Is that making sense? Mm-hmm. Right? So the only reason Revelation 14 message, 3 angels message, could be properly understood is if we properly understand the significance of what the Antichrist is doing at this time. Okay? But in order to understand what went wrong here, we have to understand this part clearly. Okay? So this is what tells us how God started it all, but how certain things fell apart, and how quick, and then the next part it shows how quickly that happened. And it shows how apart from God's plan, we are bound to go here. Okay? And therefore we need this. And we need to experience this. Okay? And here's something else. If you look at these situations, the message of salvation was never complicating. Okay? God didn't say to Noah, okay, so these are the requirements for the people that get in the ark. Okay, they need to stop doing this, they need to start doing this, long list. Okay, if they qualify for this, then you let them in the ark. Okay? He didn't do that. Just get in the ark today. Like, it doesn't matter, no prerequisites, just get in, we're good. Right? And Elijah, same thing, just whoever sends down fire is a true God. If you accept that, then we're good. Jesus didn't say, hey, if you want to be my follower, you have to get your act together. Stop your connection with the Romans, right? Just be nice to everybody, love everybody, be sacrificially good, and then I will consider you as, possible candidates for my kingdom. It's no, today, whoever the Father sends to me, I accept, right? But how many of us are struggling in our Christian experience, wondering if God loves them, wondering if they're good enough, wondering if that God will save them, right? We have all these wrong questions because we don't see the consistent pattern. We don't see the simplicity of the gospel offer because we have our own ideas. We're operating a different story, different narrative that tells us a different outcome. We have hoops and loops to jump through in order for us to go here. But this pattern shows very consistently that that is not the case, that you are completely wrong. You are expecting a different ark that has requirements. Get it? Okay? You are listening to a different prophet who's telling you something very different. And you are following a different Messiah who has expectations that you struggle to achieve, and that you are not able to share with others because you're struggling to achieve it. Does that make sense? Wrong Messiah, wrong prophet, wrong ark. And it doesn't matter how hard you try to get into the other ark, it's not going to save you. No matter how sincerely you listen to a different prophet, he can't save you. Right? No matter how sincerely you try to meet the expectations of the other Messiah, he can't save you. The three angels' message is the message that we have been called to share as a denomination. That's the last stage of this earth's history. If you think that the Adventist message is complicating and hard to understand and accept and live out, you got it all wrong. You got it completely wrong. Because the Advent message, if you look at it, is the same message. It hasn't changed. So check this out. Jesus said that the last days will be like the days of what? Noah. Last days, okay? The last message will be what message? The Elijah message, okay? And the revelation is a revelation of who? Jesus Christ, right? So everything is connecting, all with the three angels' message. This is why read Revelation 14 for me, Don. Revelation 14, 6 and 7. 16, 7. Oh, Revelation 14, 6 and 7.
Okay.
Revelation 14, 6 and 7.
The Bible reads, "Then I saw another angel flying down a tree overhead with an eternal gospel to proclaim to those who dwell on earth."
Okay, stop there for a second. What kind of gospel is it?
Everlasting.
Everlasting or eternal? Okay. What do we normally associate with the gospel? Jesus, right? Which is not wrong, but if the gospel started here with the birth of Jesus, then could it really be an eternal gospel? It would have to be around like 2,000-year-old gospel. Okay? But the Bible doesn't, Revelation 14 verse 6 doesn't call it a 2,000-year-old gospel. Right? It is the eternal gospel or the everlasting gospel. Right? So which means that it is the same good news that started from the beginning. So if you want to understand like what our message is, if you want to have a proper understanding of what the gospel is in the person of Jesus Christ, we have to understand this part first. This is the Torah and the historical books. Okay? And so if you notice something here, this is the Torah here, right? This is the blueprint on which everything else fits. And this. Together, they act as the foundation to understand the rest of the Bible. But if you miss the blueprint here and you're just kind of deciding, you got like 3 stories in there, you're lost in the genealogy, and you think that God is a little too much for sending the flood, and you think the ark is complicating, right? And you think God was too much for destroying everything, and then you think Noah screwed up here, like drinking, being drunk and all of that. You're just kind of lost in the detail. You never see the flow. Therefore, you never see anything else after that. But if you see it as a flow, as one story, you realize the Bible is telling one story, that today is the day of salvation. Like today. Like not tomorrow, not when you get your act together, but today. And get in the ark today, accept that God is the one who sends down fire. Jesus says, "Come to me, believe in me today, and you'll have salvation." Right? Same message all the way through. But if you, by any chance, you find yourself struggling with the gospel, you're understanding the Bible wrong. Simple as that. And so what I recommend, when you're reading these sections, right, Genesis 1 through 4, or 1 Samuel to 1 Kings, or Torah, or Matthew to Jude 1 through 10, to Jude, focus on the details. Right? Make sure you get the details right. Don't try to understand it. Don't try to take it apart. And let it build. Because your understanding of a narrative is completely contingent upon having the right information. Right? The right details are needed to have the right understanding. So make sure you just get so what I say is make sure you put input over understanding. And I'm not saying understanding is not important, but you need to have the right input first in order to have the correct understanding later. Does that make sense? Okay? So read the Torah, read the introduction section over and over again, just to make sure that you get the details right. And make sure you understand the story of Samuel, Saul, David, and Solomon as a continuous story of how God is building up the kingdom of Judah. Okay? Just make sure you get the details. And then once you get the details straight, don't get stuck in the details here. Like stop your approach to detail when you come here. Let it flow. Just follow the story. When after you read the Torah a couple of times, as I've been telling Ashton, just follow the historical books. Just follow it, and you will notice things that pop up that connects to the Torah, right? Like for example, if you read the book of like the Kings and Chronicles, the repetition "house of the Lord" or the house of God comes up over and over again, right? And so every king's like goodness or badness in the Chronicles is determined by their relationship to the temple. One king prepared to build it. One king built it. Another king desecrates it. Another king restores it. Another king shuts it up. Another king opens it. Another king like takes parts from the building to build like the pagan temple. Another king comes and raises money to rebuild the temple, right? Another king desecrates it again, and finally, like Josiah goes to the temple. He finds the law, and they restore the temple completely, but it's still not good enough. And the temple is destroyed. They're in captivity for 7 years. They come back, and what do? They rebuild the temple, right? So if you don't understand the significance of the Torah and the temple, you're not going to understand the historical books properly. You're not going to see the repetitions that come out to tell you, hey, remember the temple, right? The house of the Lord, the house of God. And then once you see the flow, you're going to realize why they're having the personal crisis that they're having. Okay? And then you're going to understand why they had the national crisis that they had. It's just going to be crystal clear. And you're going to see the gospel of Jesus Christ as the answer to all of this. But what is going to happen there is that when you come to here, you're going to realize, shoot, that's my story. And then you're going to know how to accept Jesus into your life. Any questions or thoughts?
Could you talk about how would you combine this Bible reading style with what you talked about yesterday of the way like the Hebrew Bible is written, the big picture, like the broad, the narrow, then the center, and the narrow, then the center.
Right.
How do you combine them together to have a big picture of everything?
So if you read it the way I tell you, like just kind of getting the details right, just focusing on the details, you're going to notice the significance of the broad, narrow, all of that, right? Because just knowing how it works is not enough unless the details are in place. And so if you just read it over and over again, you're going to notice the significance of the chiasm, the flow, and all of that. And so that's what I'm saying, just get the story. I would have never noted, like things I shared with you guys yesterday is things I learned much later. Things I saw much later. I saw this first, and then I read the Torah multiple times, and I noticed what I shared yesterday about how, like if you read the law as a promise, like I saw the big picture first, and then I wanted to see the big picture clear. And as I read it over and over again, I noticed the flow. I noticed the repetition. And so, but it's not like I didn't see it before. I didn't understand the significance of it. So you need to understand this. You need to like read the Torah over and over, get the detail, the flow of the story, and to then go back and look at the significance of how each part of the narrative like plays its part. So you got to see the forest first before you can appreciate the trees. But you got to make sure that you kind of have an idea of where the trees are to see the forest. So reading must happen first. You must read the Bible as a narrative. Like you must read it like here. This is the Reader's Bible that I made. Like you must read it this way, right? And why this is important is because, like, look at this. What is easier to read? Yeah, by far. Okay? Because one of the things that's important when you're reading a book is you need to feel a sense of progress. Right? You read a page and you're like, oh, that was good. Like, you're going to feel like you're going somewhere. And when you do that, the mind picks up the speed. and you're able to follow the story. But here, as soon as you open this thing, you're like, oh, right? I get stressed and anxious just as soon as I open this, right? Because I know that I can spend minutes here and I'll still not turn a page. Right? I can probably spend 10 minutes just to read the whole thing, right? And that's not a healthy place to be. I think Michael Jones, the comedian, the Christian comedian, he was sharing about how he started reading the Bible. He said, I used to read the Bible like 12 hours a day. And I went like 9 chapters. Right?
Wow.
Like, in the sense that he's trying to understand everything as he's going. So like, it's just taking him so long. And that's discouraging. And so Bible reading becomes an act of survival of the fittest. Like, who can get through the boredom is the one who wins. But if we can make it easier by the reader's Bible, then the story becomes much more manageable. And when you follow the flow, before you realize like you're seeing the story and you didn't even know it. And so, yeah. Any other question?
Personally,
Thoughts?
it really helped for the reader's Bible for me was that seeing that.
You want to use this? So if you're asking questions, that's just kind of
Yeah, what really helped me with the reader's Bible was seeing that not just the chapter numbers, but even the verse numbers, because when we tend to study the Bible, we would like see, okay, verse 1 is different from verse 2. Maybe verse 1 has a different message from verse 2. But then not seeing those verse numbers is like, okay, they're connected. So just seeing the flow of it and not tearing each verse apart and be like, okay, what is this verse trying to say? What is this verse trying to say? You just keep continuously reading. And I think that helped me to see the flow and the bigger picture as I'm reading as well. So even the verse numbers, I think not having it there really helps. Yeah, because I don't know, okay, where does verse 1 stop? Where does verse 2 stop? Yeah.
anyone else?
Yeah, I think for me, when it came to reading through the Torah, I'm still in the middle of the Torah. But I found that trying to read it, like with the chapter numbers and the verses, and like having it blocked out the way it is with columns and things like that, it was harder to go or like find the flow of the story without going back. So I would have to. Yeah, I would read through a few chapters of Genesis, and I'm like, okay, where are we at in the story? So I had to go back and get a little review. I'm like, okay.
Okay, never mind. Just like that.
Okay, perfect. I was like, okay, so now we're gonna go back and get a better idea of what I read before and how it connects to the rest of the story, and it's kind of like a back and forth. And I found that pretty difficult, and so I think I will probably get the Reader's Bible to help me just keep on going, essentially.
No, so many people have told me like, oh, like I read my regular Bible just fine. Like, people have said that. Like, I love it. It works for me. Like, why do I need to get the Reader's Bible? I'm like you just have no idea, like what this is. Like, you have absolutely no idea. You think this is okay and working for you? That's great. I'm happy that you're reading the Bible. Any way to read the Bible, that's great. I'm happy. But there is an experience that is different, fundamentally different, when you read the Bible with the Reader's Bible. Like, you follow the story much better. And so, like, what people don't realize is that the Bible, like, chapters and verses were added because people didn't know what to do with the Bible. Like, the chapters were added in the 13th century by a Catholic priest to help the clergy who had no idea what the Bible was because they never studied it. Okay? And then they never read it, and so they just needed to know how to reference things when they talked up front, right? And so chapters and verses was added purely because of ignorance. And then verses were added later during the Protestant Reformation because the Bibles were being flooded into the world, and people never read the Bible through, so they didn't know how to work with it. They didn't know the story, so they needed to just be able to reference things very quickly without knowing the Bible. And so they added the verses. And so chapters and verses were added purely for biblical illiteracy. It was not there was no inspiration behind it. It was just literally two random guys decided to add the chapters and verses. And now we've standardized it and accepted it as truth. And we've built literal systems around it. Like you have doctrines that are just taking verse out of here. That's how we do it. But the thing is, like, Paul would have gone crazy if he knew that's what we were doing. Because he would have never expected us to take apart his letters into like chunks and like sentences and build theology on it. Like Paul would have thought like, no, you got to read the whole thing. Right? Like when my wife wrote me letters, I don't analyze each verse, each like sentence, each line, like just divide it in random places, and say, okay, what does this mean? That's ridiculous. But that is exactly what we do with the Bible. Now, that is okay if you read the whole thing. If you read, understand the message, the flow, then you can go back and look at it and say, okay, what is it saying here? Because I'm not clear on that. You're clear on the big picture, but you want to know how this fits into the big picture. That's fine. Right? That's great. That's very, very helpful. Right? Enlightenment happens. But without that, just analyzing the parts to begin with, you are not ready to share it. Because there is a good chance what you believe about this text will be contradicted by another verse somewhere else. Okay? But the Bible doesn't contradict itself. We've made it that way because, so if you look at Christian history, what's amazing is that there is a explosion of denominations after chapters and verses are introduced. And what's very weird is that people make a denomination, and then they get corrected later on by another group of people, and they try to change the church, then they get kicked out and they start a new denomination, which means that these people that made the first denomination didn't read the Bible through correctly. Right? If they read the bigger message, they would not be contradicted later. But the fact that they did that, they were contradicted later, and clearly these people were right, it means that they didn't read the Bible as a whole. They just kind of picked what they liked and built a denomination on it. Does that make sense? But that happened consistently throughout history.